Welcome. Global Philosophy Forum of the Global Dialogue Institute here at Haverford College. It's our 16th year, and we've had magnificent speakers, and this year it's really amazing. Joan Borysenko and Gregg Braden, each individually, and welcome. This morning, I should just confess, we had a television 1-hour interview recording session in the next building, and it was so beautiful to dance with these two individuals. They're very high beings. I feel very privileged and we're honored to have them with us. In beginning, which is also part of our Quaker tradition, but also our tradition in this, could we have a moment of silence, please? Welcome to the forum on this beautiful spring day. And when I say Global Dialogue Institute, those words are very carefully chosen. Global has many meanings, but it means for us the planetary connection of worldviews, religions, ideologies, perspectives, all meeting in the marketplace. And the question is, can we connect and communicate across the borders of our religions, our worlds, our traditions, our disciplines, between spirituality and science? That's what global dialogue is. And we're in a global age now, it's clear. We've always been, but it's now really in our face. And we're facing great challenges. We all know this on the planet. And if you notice the press release, we try to give a sense of a gathering of a number of groups across the planet, but it's in the life of the people. They're feeling changes are happening, crises are accelerating, things seem to be imploding, but also exciting possibilities are before us. We know that, and we're trying to make sense of that. So one of the groups that have formed, I'm with the World Commission on Global Consciousness, working with a number of eminent leaders and emerging leaders across the planet, the Dalai Lama, Desmond Tutu, Jane Goodall, Wangari Maathai, and a number of others. And we formed the World Wisdom Council of the elders and youth, holding wisdom on the planet, or trying to hold the importance of wisdom for humanity facing our crises. And another group that is emerging, it's a magnificent one called Evolutionary Leaders. And Joan and Gregg and I are all part of the co-founding members of the gathering. It's a gathering of people who feel it's urgent to help facilitate what is happening, a profound shift on the planet in the life of the people long coming. How do we make sense of it? We need it. And so the title, Making Sense and Finding Sense in our great shift. And it's vital for our sustainability at this time to become conscious about it. And the evolutionary leaders have given a call to conscious evolution. A magnificent idea. That evolution is not just happening to us and we're victims of it passively, but in our evolution of our culture and consciousness as human beings, we have a choice in how we conduct our minds and our consciousness. We can shape and co-create our evolutionary future. And this is the call to conscious evolution. So much is in the offing, and so much is in terms of the high stakes in this question. So it's a very vital question we're looking at today. I should mention that in this forum, we have a number of associates you saw at the front desk and all throughout helping. I want us to just acknowledge these Global Dialogue Institute associates who give of their life and their energy and their love to keep this forum going. Could we give a hand to our associates, please? Thank you. And in the spirit of this dialogue, we see this not as an academic conference as such. We're not here to talk about. This forum is a vital portal of awakening, transformation, a rite of passage. And so this event is not to talk about the shift, but to model it, to be in the shift, to celebrate it, and to embody it in whatever we can. And I can think of no better magnificent individuals as Joan and Gregg to help us hold that space. For Joan, she's a graduate of Bryn Mawr College. I'm not going to fully introduce her now, but just to mention, she graduated in 1967. I arrived at Haverford in 1968. This is my 42nd year, so she passed the baton to me. And so it's really a welcoming home for Joan. Joan, say a few words, please.
Hi, everybody. You know, it was like wandering this campus 43 years later was like having a near-death experience.
How about a new life experience?
It was a new life experience because memories would come back, you know? I thought about, you'll see my first slide has to do with the paradigm shift, and it was at a party at Haverford when I first heard that phrase. And it was my boyfriend at Haverford who asked me a question. He said, "What will you do when you're 40?" And this thought came to my mind, totally unbidden. I said, "I will write a best-selling book." And he looked at me and he said, "Most narcissistic thing I ever heard." And then when I was 39, I was at a workshop, and somebody said to me, what we had to do at the workshop was, "What in a year will you do?" And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to be 40. I hadn't thought of it until like 20 years. I said, I have to write a best-selling book. And then part of the exercise was you had to call your partner in 1 year to see if you had done it. And the guy who was my partner called and said, "Well, have you written your best-selling book yet?" And I said, "No, but it's on my mind." And the next morning, a scout for a book editor called me. I was running a program at Harvard Medical School for people with AIDS, cancer, and stress-related disorders. They said, "We've heard of you. Would you write a book about your program?" And I said, "Well, I guess so." And the rest is history. And it all started on this campus. You heard it here.
Wow.
Welcome, Joan. Welcome.
All right.
And it's also a special pleasure to welcome Gregg Braden, my son's daughter here, and Devin, who's 30 years old today, was reading Gregg's books avidly a year ago. And I said, "How would you like me to present Gregg Braden for your birthday?" And it's a rare moment to do that. But Gregg, you have so many admirers here, and I just want you to say a few words here. Welcome to Absolute.
Well, thank you. And I'll be brief. I guess, are you all as happy and excited to be here as I am today? I am. You know, thank you. And I know you're a pilot, so I'm really hoping you're not reading my books while you're flying. Just tell me you're not. Even if you are, tell me you're not. Well, we did, as Ashok mentioned, we just finished filming in another building, and it was very obvious from that filming and very obvious from everything we're doing here that this is no ordinary time in the history of the planet. This is no ordinary day. This can be no ordinary conference, and that's why I'm really, really excited to be here. And I want to take a moment. I'm going to take 2 moments. First, are you our AV person? Are you running AV? In the back, you mean? Yeah, on the mic, can you bring our mids down? You don't have any EQ at all? What do we do to make it sound really sexy? What do we do to make it sound? Oh, we're going to work with it. We're going to work with it. I want to thank every one of you here for a number of reasons. But one of those reasons is because there are a lot of other things you could have done today. And every one of you, if you really think about this, you've all changed your lives. You rearranged your lives to meet here with us this afternoon. That's not something that happens in a day. That means that there is a lifetime of experience preceding today that makes a day like this meaningful to you to rearrange your lives. And so as we go into this day today, I just want to personally acknowledge how much I appreciate each of you, what you've lived, the choices you've made, And my prayer is that when we leave here today, we don't know how this day is going to end, and that was our agreement. We wouldn't have an agreement because we're co-creating it together. But whatever happens here today, it's the beginning of something for all of us, and we're all going to go into the world, and we're going to carry with us in our hearts what this time means, and maybe a little bit more clarity. And that can only happen from all the work that you've done all of your life up until this moment. So for all of you, I am deeply grateful. Thank you very, very much from my heart for being here.
Well, since this is a hope for deep dialogue and energy flow, please think of this event as a meditation, ever deepening in our energies, and we're all co-creating, as Gregg beautifully pointed out. We're all co-creators, and in your being here and holding the space, you're proactively participating. And we'll have dialogue as we go, and the last hour is saved for dialogue with you and between us here. And so in the flow of our dialogue, the power of music and meditation, we're going to have punctuations. And my other son, Saith, is a musician who's coming out now with very powerful music. He's a healer, a yoga teacher, accomplished yoga teacher. And his art form, he was trained on campus in early years in classical music. He grew up in the environment of the campus and is now living in Sedona, where he is developing his yoga teaching and his art and his healing. And his songs are profoundly, I call them shift songs. And you have the Blue program with 8 songs on it. And he's going to do 3 songs. And the first one that he's going to do, and again, think of them as a shift meditation to help open up the energy for our flow of our event. It's called Step Outside. And by that, as you read the words, you'll see a young person who is anguished and in despair and lost and just asking, and he turns to the sky and say, please, help me. He opens a dialogue with the sky, which is a metaphor for asking the infinite force, guide me, please. And the sky gives him advice, and that's a song. Yeah? And later on, he'll do one, It's Time, which to me is a theme for this, the theme song for this event. A powerful shift song that calls us to this moment of choice and facing this moment, it's time, and so on. So let's welcome Saith as he does the first meditative song, Step Outside. Saith.
Thank you. How are y'all feeling? Good. It's a beautiful day. A good day for this song. I actually wrote this song 5 years ago. I tried to move back from Sedona, and Sedona pulled me right back. But in the time that I was here, this song was born. I sat outside in the same yard that I grew up. And just the chorus, just the Step Outside came out. And it wasn't until years after that the song was completed. So it's a nice coming around for me.
Woke up this morning like you do. My body was aching, I did not want it to. So I pondered it over more of my favorite cereal, asking why, but I got an answer from the sky. She said, step outside, step outside, step outside. It's simple little something that you haven't tried. Come on, step outside, step outside. It's a simple little something that you haven't tried. Step outside, no way. Got too many things gotta do today. Got money on my mind, bills to pay. Hardly ever any extra time to play. So throw me a bone here, sky, come on. Pretty please tell me, what do you say? Well, she said that every little thing that I've been trying to be is just a little itty bitty part of me. And everything that I really wanted I called a dream, pushed to the side. And for my aching, a simple little something that I haven't tried. All I gotta do is just step outside. Step outside. Step outside. It's a simple little something that you haven't tried. Step outside. Step outside. One time. One time. It's a simple little. Come on, step outside. No, step outside. Step outside. It's a simple little something that you haven't tried. Step outside. You're mine. Alright. I got reason to believe that I have been deceived. My crazy, crazy maze of all the ways of man. And I had reason to believe that I just can't see. Just through the crazy, crazy laws of man. And I've got a reason to conceive a brand new me, a brand new me, yeah. All I gotta do is just step outside. Come on, step outside. Step outside. It's simple, it's something that you haven't tried. No, step outside. No, step outside. Come on, step outside. It's a little something that you haven't tried. Step outside. One time. One time. Oh, watch the sunrise in its own time. And its own time. It's the new moon to the full moon in its own time. I free my mind. I step outside.
Thank you.
Thank you, Seth. His CD is available, and there'll be a DVD of this program available, so let us know if you're interested. I'm Dr. Joni Carley, a fellow here at Global Dialogue Institute, and we say welcome. It's great to see you. We truly are in a celebration. We're not just here to learn and grow. We're here to really celebrate. To start that off, we want to get that dialogical energy going, so shake someone's hand who you don't know. And you know what? Keep that going. Oh, hi. Good. How are you? Keep that energy going during the breaks, because this is what it's really about. It's really about the energy. And we do have some awesome people coming to speak, so let me have your attention again. Thank you. So also, please turn off your cell phones. And I have the great pleasure of introducing to you Professor Ashok Gangadine. I know most of you know him, but sometimes we don't know our local people as well as we know people from outside of the area. He hinted at a little bit of what he does, but he's really known and plays on world stages in ways that it's hard to appreciate because he's just our local guy who keeps the local community in gear. So he's not only been the chair of the philosophy department and teaching here for 42 years, he's also the founder and director of Global Dialogue Institute. He taps into and he clarifies global wisdom in a way that no one has and is really doing profound work. He already spoke about his leadership in the World Wisdom Council and in the World Commission on Global Consciousness and Spirituality, working with the Dalai Lama, Desmond Tutu, Jane Goodall, Mikhail Gorbachev, and Deepak Chopra. He's helping to bring real vision and real values to global concerns, something so desperately needed in the political arena. Ashok's most recent book is called Meditations of Global First Philosophy. He's got a very powerful and jam-packed product called The Awakening of the Global Mind, published by Sounds True, which is the world's foremost publisher of consciousness-raising courses. Ashok was a guest on the national show Thinking Aloud with Jeffrey Mishlove. And he earned an Emmy nomination for his own show, The Global Lens, and it is an award-winning show. He's truly a treasure for us locally and truly a treasure for the world globally. I give to you Ashok Gangadine.
Thank you. I'm going to make my way up to the stage because I would prefer to be close to you, but I have to use that chart because I wanted to create a PowerPoint. What I'm going to be doing when I go up there, and to visualize, again, think of this as a meditation, not a lecture. I'm going to do something that's outrageous. I'm going to try and go through 3,000 years of evolution of consciousness of our great wisdom teachers on this planet, across the planet, and try to open up and experience the dilation of the global heart-mind, the global lens, which has been a deep, moving theme on this planet. When we try to make sense of a shift, the shift is so enormous. Imagine the evolution of humanity, the evolution of culture, the evolution of consciousness, of science, of every aspect of our arts and of our human life. Every aspect is under radical, deep shift for millennia. It's not an overnight thing. So if we want to reflect on that, the journey I would like to offer today, and then Joan and Gregg in their own magnificent way, who are pioneers in their fields and crossing and bringing so much together, they will develop their own way of understanding this fundamental shift. Everything's at stake. And so what I'm going to do when I go up to use that flip chart to create a PowerPoint is to present some visualization to help us see in a very focused way how can we get the shift that our great visionary evolutionary elders for millennia have been urging humanity to move into. The struggle of Abraham when he was dialoguing with God and God was calling him. The magnificence of Moses in bringing the laws, encountering the fire of the burning bush. The awakening of Buddha and the Four Noble Truths, calling us to a deep shift to become human. All of the Bhagavad Gita, the dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna, this magnificent journey, a dialogue where Arjuna is broken down on the battlefield. He doesn't fully understand why in a fratricidal war, a family's broken, a violent situation, and he's a warrior, following the ethics of the warrior to fight no matter what, and something pierces him, and he sees his own family and uncles and kindred spirits on the other side, and he drops his weapon. I can't kill my own people. It's one of those great moments on the planet, and he turns to Krishna, who happens to be his charioteer. Krishna is the incarnation of Om, the infinite force, right there, guiding him as a charioteer. We should all be so lucky. And he said, Krishna, help me. And when he dropped his weapon, it was like a suicidal act. Imagine you drop your weapon, and he was a war hero. And to drop that symbolic weapon was almost like a suicidal moment. I'm finished. That was the beginning of the journey of a great shift, And all of the yoga science of Krishna teaching Arjuna was to help him move from where he was, that level of consciousness, into a more dilated, open space where he was in the space of Om, where his self matured and he awakened. I'm giving examples. The magnificence of Jesus and everything that Jesus was practicing in his magnificent life and mission to help us shift. He was shifting language. He was shifting the consciousness. And every word he used was, his colleagues and disciples didn't quite understand it. You've got to die to be born again. If you take that literally, do you mean you have to die? No, you have to die to cross into the Christ awakened consciousness. I and the Father are one. All of these things, the Last Supper, the covenant, the shift. He was trying to open up the script. This is my body. This is my blood. The logos in the flesh. All of that. What's going on across the planet? I'm just giving examples. What's been driving all history? If you just look at the European journey, which is magnificent, from the early Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, and the early Greek founding of the Logos, where the Plato and Aristotle, Socrates understood the Logos is the Greek word for the infinite source of the light of the mind, of all language, of all reason, of all intelligence, speech. Logos, logic, comes from Logos. And that, if you look at the history of Logos and trace that magnificent line as the Hebraic, Judaic tradition joins with the Hellenistic in the Christian evolution, all through the centuries, all the great philosophers, all through the medieval times, the birthing of science with Bacon, Galileo, and all the way through to Newton. What's going on? Why is science moving that way? And Gregg is going to help us see where science is today at the frontiers. It's under a profound evolution. Why is science working? What's so great about it? And how about the great philosophers? Locke, Berkeley, Hume, Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, Kant, Hegel, Nietzsche, all the way through now. What's moving history? I'm going to try and give us a sense of that. So I'm going to go up on the stage and try to stay with me. Are we still on here? Can you hear me? I think that camera is supposed to capture. Thank you, Roger. Are we all right? I'm going to have to do a balancing act here. I wanted to have this down there closer to you, but I guess you can see it better, and the camera is supposed to put this PowerPoint up as I speak. I hope it works. So let me give you a quick sense. Again, I said I'm doing something outrageous. I want to continue this storyline I'm opening up to make sense of a great shift. And what I'm going to try and visualize is to give some symbolic. A philosopher, logician wants to get at the script, the language. And there's a reason for that. Because what I'm going to suggest is that, and I'm going to use two spaces. The lower space, I'm going to try to develop a visual of where most of us live and speak and use our minds and live in our world and build our culture. And what I'm suggesting is if we could step back and realize that we are all shaped with a lens of our minds. Most of us are not educated to understand that. We're in our cultures, we're raised by our parents and our siblings and our peer groups. We learn in the culture. All that's going on, the lens of the mind is being shaped for your cultural worldview, right? And that means everything you see in your world is going to appear to you on the screen of your awareness. And most of us get caught on the screen in the content of what shows up and don't understand who's generating that idea of the world, how our world's formed. They're profoundly diverse worlds across this planet as you cross borders of different worlds. The world of the Confucius in Chinese, ancient, of Lao Tzu, if you go into the world of the Chinese classical mind, it's a different world than the Hebraic world, different from the Greek, different from our contemporary American world. Are we taught how our worlds are formed? What's more challenging is if we don't even have literacy in how our worlds are formed, How can we communicate across worlds? If I'm living in the Christian world, and that's the space in which my mind and my life has been built, in that biblical Christian worldview, and I believe that's truth, can I understand the Hindu mind? Can I understand the Buddhist? Can I understand African ways of thought? Can I go into the mind space of a Lakota? We don't know how, most of us. It's a profound difference when we shift the lens of the mind into different worldviews. But if we could step back from wherever we are, and it's complex, because we'll see in a moment that the ordinary American person is living in multiple worlds. And that's a problem, because if each world has its own definition of language and script and reality, and what is truth and what is fact, and we don't know how to negotiate and cross and communicate across those worlds, we're broken into pieces. So if we step back from whatever lens we have and dilate into this space, I'm going to gesture here, it's going to be a space that all our magnificent teachers across the planet for millennia have been urging humanity to step back, step outside, as the song said. Step outside into the space where things are profoundly connected and flowing. Right? So that you would find in the Chinese the Tao. I hope you can see this. The Tao that is named in this language is not the Tao. Opening lines. You should think about that. You switch into the Hindu Om tradition. Om is the infinite symbol of all symbols. Think about that. If Tao is a name of all names, and everything in reality is named, and it's coming out of Tao, everything that's showing up here is Taoing. Everything that shows up here is Oming. You can switch into the Buddhist tradition, it's Shunyata. When Buddha had a great awakening, what did he see? He saw that existence is suffering. It has a cause. Clinging to your story and your script and your lens of your mind, your identity. That's the source of suffering. Existence is suffering. It has a cause. The third noble truth, we have a choice. The axiom of choice. I don't have to be addicted to this pattern and this script. I can upgrade and rehab. And the fourth noble truth is rehab. You can rehabilitate your patterns of consciousness by letting go of the source of suffering and upgrading into the Buddha field, which is empty of all this. That's shunyata. Shunya means zero in Sanskrit. So reality, the best word for it is zeroness. But that zero is so profound, it's overflowing. It's not a void. This can't cross into this. This stuff can't survive the way it is in this place of identity by crossing into the space of the holistic unified field. If you go into the Judaic origins, Yahweh, infinite spirit. Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God is one. And when you hear that, the call to Israel and to all of humanity, the infinite spirit is calling out to wherever you are. Recognize this first. Place what is first. That's the only ultimate axiom of wisdom. What is first? There is something first. The very source that generates everything else. Honor it. Just acknowledge it. But to acknowledge it, you can't do it down here. You've got to come into it. You've got to join it. You've got to be intimate with it. That's what it means. And that's the struggle of Abraham. God is saying, put me first. But Abraham had his agenda. He had his son, representing his story. This is what I value, the most important thing in my life. And the infinite force is saying, no, let go of Isaac. Which is symbolically, don't put your agenda, whatever it is, you ego people, above honoring what is first. That's the only ultimate axiom of reality. What is first, honors first. So the struggle of Abraham is a magnificent global struggle for every human being. If you are living the ego story and you're putting your ego agenda first above honoring what is highest and what is true and what is real and surrounding us and making everything work, something is wrong. You begin to see echoes as you step out of this space into this deeper space where it's a global dilation of the heart-mind, and start to listen to the echoes of these stories across the planet. Or if you say Allah, if that is the infinite name, right? And all of Islam means surrender to Allah. Surrender this to honor what is first. You keep hearing that over and over. And of course, the story of Jesus and the drama surrounding Jesus in terms of the logos in the flesh. And the word logos comes from the Greek, as I mentioned. So the Greek philosophers are trying to realize that the fundamental principle of all reality is the logos that lights up the mind with intelligence and consciousness. And therefore a world comes into view with the lighting up of the logos. Logos Sophia. Sophia is wisdom. By the way, my field, philosophy. You know what philosophy means, right? Philosophy is philosophia, a lover of Sophia. Sophia is the infinite feminine embodiment of wisdom. So the field of philosophy is to be a lover of wisdom, a lover of Sophia. So another name here is Logos Sophia from the Greek, as the ultimate source that generates all reality. And logic comes from logos, because logic is a structure of consciousness. And if you can get the alphabet of consciousness, that's what logic is after, the ultimate DNA code that's encoded in the structure of consciousness in the logos. So there's a grammar of logos, a DNA that if you could understand the dynamics and structure and calculus of logos, that's what philosophers have been obsessed with all through the European tradition. We want the logical structure, the deep structure of thought. Why? It's even more powerful than the DNA for the biological structure, because that is coming from the logos. All scripts come out of the infinite script, out of the logos. So that in the case of the Christ, when John in the gospel borrows the logos language and begins, in the beginning is the logos, and the logos is flesh in the body of Jesus, it is the birthing of the logos in the world. And the whole journey of that story is, how do we get out of this alienated situation? This line is very important. That somehow, if fundamental reality, whatever name you use, I've been giving examples, is it Tao? Is it Om? Is it Shunyata? Yahweh, Allah, God, Christ, energy? Physics is naming it too. Physics wants to know, what is the ultimate stuff of the universe? If it's energy, then everything is coming out of that energy. Let's understand the ultimate deep structure of energy. So there's almost an obsession with trying to get at what is most fundamental and first. And what happens, the consensus across the planet is, it's infinite. This is headline news. The fundamental field, the ultimate force, is infinite. Why? Because there's something incoherent in putting a boundary on it, because what's on the other side? So the infinite is boundless. Well, how many are there? 3, 4, 2? No, it's got to be 1. Why? Because if there were 2, it wouldn't be infinite, because something would be outside of it bounding it. So the infinite calculus, the most elementary point, is it must be 1. How much 1? Infinitely 1. What does that do? It generates boundless, infinite diversity. That has not been understood. There's a language here in this space that all of our magnificent teachers have been urging. This is where we become human, when we don't get stuck at this level of our evolution, of using this everyday script that apparently is broken and fragmented and fragmenting and polarizing and creates dualisms at all levels. How many of us have been educated to understand that? That the everyday language we live in, let's call it ego-mental. We don't even have a word for it. Ego-mental, right? And somehow the teachers who are seeing this and urging humanity, don't be stuck here. You're going to suffer. You cannot flourish and blossom as a whole human being in this calculus of the mind. So when you step outside, again the song, and go into the space, you begin to see mega patterns, astounding disclosures across the borders of the planet by our great teachers speaking different fonts, They're all what Jesus is saying is not the same as Krishna. It's not the same as Buddha. It's not the same as Lao Tzu. It's not the same as what the scientists are discovering as they explore the fundamental unified field. They're discovering different ways of putting it. But if you can begin to tap the Logos grammar, the code here of this script, and there is a profound script that has been emerging through our great teachers over millennia. And the tipping point that we're talking about, arriving at this point of humanity in our journey, is that this space is imploding on itself. And all of the calling of our teachers to cross this line into this space is the shift of humanity to becoming fully human, to becoming awakened human beings. And this is where this crossing is the portal that has been seen to be all important as we mature as human beings. And I want to elaborate that point. So far, this is a kind of introduction of the visual, that something is going on here. This is where most of us seem to be living. We learn in our culture a calculus of the mind, a way of using language. We don't understand the consequences fully of that, but our language itself, the mind operating process, is creating fractures and fissures and fragmentation, alienation. And it's producing abysmal suffering at the most personal, individual, internal level, interpersonal level, cultural level, political level. The civic space is broken. And so in America, for example, we know that what is the state of democracy? The civic space. If this is what's dominating, this kind of mind, if this way of using our minds is creating deep cracks and separations and alienations so that you get genocides, holocausts, breakdowns of human relations of all kinds. Why is that? Our teachers have been urging us to see it. All of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is here. When I say ego mental, I'm trying to suggest something like this. That most of us use our language, and in logic, in philosophy, it's called the space where we form our sentences, our concepts, our mental space. And that's where we make sense. If I say S is P, Socrates is wise, grass is green, sun is shining, I am American, right? I am male. Think about it. That's where our stories are made. When you learn a language and a culture, you learn how to make sense. That means what? You know how to put pieces of information together, words. And when you connect them correctly, you make sense. We talk about making sense. That's the topic of this, making sense of our shift. Making sense is an art of the mind, and your culture is a way, a prescription for making sense. But what makes sense in one culture does not make sense in another. In the Hindu culture, if you're talking about reincarnation and transmigration and karma and dharma and samsara, those words don't make sense in a Judeo-Christian vocabulary. It's a different mind space, it's a different mental ecology. When science is speaking of the Big Bang and making sense of the universe is expanding. After Einstein opened up the Newton's world, Newton gave us one world and Einstein pushed it to another level. And I won't go into that topic now, it's a whole other topic. How do we shift worlds? We know it happens, they're cultural revolutions. How do you move from Newton's world to Einstein's world? And now at the next frontier, the kind of world that Gregg is going to help us look into in terms of fractal time and fractal intelligence. For example, it keeps evolving. So if you start to scramble and experiment with me, and you start to put words together, you'll see very quickly that if you put most of the words that we know together, they don't make sense. If I say, 7 is blue, it sounds, or wait a minute, 7 is not a physical thing. It can't be blue, it can't be colored. When you say 7 is blue, you may want to get poetic, okay, right? Suppose you say love is blue. Well, love is not a physical thing, it can't have a physical property. But, Saith may be singing the blues. Love is blue, right? So the poets might want to push the edge there of sense. The point I'm making is that what makes sense for one language does not make sense in another. So if you're speaking Big Bang and looking at the universe that way, and that you're also speaking Genesis, the biblical script, and how it accounts for the evolution and emergence of the universe. It's a different script. It's a different way of making sense of the world. So when you ask, is it Big Bang or Genesis? Which is the right story? We don't know how to proceed, often. So when you cross different culture, when you cross a cultural boundary, you're crossing worlds and different ways of making sense. And the point I'm trying to stress is that the lens of the mind that you're using is what's shaping the sense that shows up. So this is where the lens of the mind is cultivated, and everything in your world is showing up there, and that is your identity. If I ask you, tell me about yourself, most of us start what's called predicating. We're giving sentences and weaving a story that makes sense. I'm American, I'm a male, I'm a teacher, and you go on, and that's your ID. But what if you see the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna, who is speaking this language, to Arjuna, after he breaks down in the battle and doesn't know how to proceed to make sense of his world, Krishna helps him to come out of this space, step outside, and move into the space of Om. That's where the higher self comes forward. And that's the pathway of yoga. That's one pathway, the pathway of yoga, to go from the broken place into the place of healing and wholeness. So, when I pointed out that many of us might have multiple worlds at the same time, this is where worlds collide. I'm going very quickly here. I'm covering quite a bit of territory. But an everyday American person can have multiple worlds. And if worlds are so profoundly different, then each of you, say I'm a believer in the Bible. That's one of my worldviews, one of the lenses of my mind. I see myself that way. Okay? Everything about my world is in that biblical language. But I'm also a physicist, and I know that the Big Bang is true. So here I've got Big Bang and Genesis, two stories I'm carrying. I don't know how to connect them. I am different in those two different worlds, right? So that I'm feeling the stress of that, and I'm American, a civic American, and here as American I believe in the ecumenical space. I don't want to bring my religion into my politics, and I want to keep them separate, and that is also causing a deep stress in my life. So I'm seeing my therapist. Joan is going to help us out here, and she's not Jungian, but if she were Jungian, she'd be saying, Ashok, or whomever, you've got a male and a female in you, anima and animus. And unless you get them together, you're not going to be an integral person. That really now gets me messed up. I've got a woman inside of me to deal with, you know. So I say, oy vey, you know, and I go on. But I have a tree-hugging friend who does yoga, and I'm chanting Om, right? I'm chanting Om, and I'm doing Feng Shui, and I'm moving the Qi energy, and you get the picture. And each of those personality pieces don't know how to talk to one another. It's called normal schizophrenia. And that's where most of us live. You don't know how to dialogue. You can't be an integral whole person. So a lot is at stake. This is where wars break out between worlds, 9/11s. Worlds don't know how to communicate. We know that. Religious wars and ideological battles, because this place is dividing. So what I'm not going into now, I don't want to go there. It's a whole other meditation. Is tell me, please, why does this way of using my mind break everything into pieces and polarizes myself and my relationships, my love life, my family life, my political life is broken? Why? Our great teachers are teaching us because of the mental operating system. The ego mental mind breaks what it touches. That's one of the great lessons in terms of the shift. So when you look scientifically and stand back and say, could it be that the implosion of the economic situation, the degradation of the environment, the breakdown of our political life in the cracked, polarized civic space, and so forth, the stresses we feel in our lives, and Joan will help us understand the mind-body issues, the split between mind and body that takes place here, it's all traceable to living the law of identity. I'm going to go very fast now. The law of identity, which rules here, is that A is A. Everything has its own identity. That's a no-brainer, right? A is A. How can you argue? Why are all of our great teachers saying, don't get stuck with A is A? Why? Because it cuts you off from connectivity. That's the key point. I'm not going to develop that now. But if I trace that out, you begin to see every word begins to go into its own space. Space, time, cause, substance, me, you, everything. The subject whose thinking is here, the object is there. If I'm here and I see you, you are an object. If you're an object, I'm objectifying you. Our great teachers saw never objectify a human being, not yourself or another. When you're processing yourself here, you're objectifying yourself. You're making yourself an object of information. That has to do with the suffering. So this line is the line of the fall, breaking the circuits of connectivity and flow. So the teachers are trying to teach us a shift from the broken space, and in the biblical tradition is sin. Sin is separation from connectivity. In the Hindu tradition, samsara. Samsara is a repeating cycle of suffering based upon karma, which is your buying into your fixed identity. And yoga is burning off that karma so that you can cross into the Om flow. So do we know the Om script? How literate are we in the script of Logos? We don't even have a fundamental name for this field. I use in my work the word Logos, but when I say Logos, you've got to really write it in a different... When you cross from here to there, you're crossing to a different dimension of consciousness and language and the lens of the mind and experience and life. That's the main point I want to stress. The consensus of wisdom on the planet is when we step out of the ego space, which dominates us and breaks us in all kinds of ways, and we can't flourish, and we somehow cross into this space of flow and interconnectivity, by whatever name you call it, Chi, Tao, Om, Shunyata, Yahweh, Allah, Christ, that's when you're in flow. What is the language of flow? How do you use words in flow? That's the question of our time. Do we have the literacy? Do we know the code? Do we know the code of Logos? How do we use that script? And that's what I want to illustrate and conclude, and hopefully we'll pursue this in questions later. I began to see over the years here at the college, after going to India and learning more about meditative awakening and so forth, that there is a striking difference between the teachers who are speaking this language and trying to help us understand why this produces suffering and anguish and breakdowns of all kinds. And so I began to see I needed to somehow bring this into the open, to see it clearly, and to see the change from here across this line to there. So now I'm going to turn from this messy. I began to see that, and I used double parentheses to mark this space, the Logos space. But you have to somehow mark it and not put it down here like this. That's if you put God here, in this space, it's not the same as God. Because the script here that you use makes the thing finite objects. And if you're trying to get it into the space of the infinite force, you cannot script it here, is the main point. So if you're using ego mental language, mark it, please, because it's life and death. Any word you say here, I use strokes to mark it. If I say I, mark it. If I say I, in this more awakened, holistic, integral, flowing sense, mark it that way. There's a world of difference between I and I. Every word that you use in ego script can be upgraded into its Logos script. That's the main point of the shift that I wanted to stress. And I want to give some examples, and then I'll stop. I've been suggesting that our great teachers were speaking this script, and the listeners and the followers are tending to be here. And that's the disconnect that somehow we've got to solve in the shift, the maturation. Because to be an ego self is not the same as being an awakened, holistic, integral self. And I want to give examples of that. Because when, for example, just to get a quick one, when Descartes was doing his meditations, And it was a great turning point for European history, but we blew it. He saw that he could doubt everything in his world. He's a brilliant mathematician, brilliant logician, philosopher. And he said, how much can I doubt? And he saw that every word, every sentence he made, even 2 + 2 = 4, he could doubt. What if there's a demon deceiving him to make him believe that 2 + 2 = 4 is an obvious truth? And that scared him when he saw that I could doubt everything in my life. When I'm waking, I could be dreaming. And when I'm even doing mathematics, I could be deceived. Because the line between the thinker and the object of thought can always have mistake and illusion and delusion. He got that. All of our great teachers understood that. This is the place that can be radically doubted. Nothing stands. Why? Because it's not touching the source and foundation of truth. So when Descartes stripped and dropped everything at that point, and he was terrified, he said, I am. He crossed into the language of the higher script, which had no more information like this. He said, I am. What am I? I don't know. But that I am is certain. Let me proceed to see what else I know of myself. It was a magnificent moment for the European tradition. But did we get it? Unfortunately not. Why? Because all of this is cut out, and we put Descartes right here, back in the box. I think, therefore I am. And we stayed right there. When Descartes' magnificent moment was he crossed into the script and he said, oh my God, I am. What I would like to stress at this point is that when you cross into this integral holistic script, the logos script, words behave differently than when they're here. These words are always outside of themselves. When you use a word in ego script, it's dualistic. It describes something outside. If I say, write the word black, it describes a black pen outside. There's always a difference between the thinker, the thought, and the world out there. When you cross into this script, the thinker, the thought, and the reality meet in one PowerPoint. So when you say I am, you're not using a pronoun referring to some entity. You're amming. To say I am is to declare and pronounce and enforce and perform yourself. The thinker, the thought, and the reality converge in a PowerPoint. That's the key to crossing into this integral script. Why? That's the logic of Om. What do you mean? Well, if Om is the infinite word and it's infinite unity, then every point touches right now. And you can't get that in the script. So if you could say I am, you are in a PowerPoint that is touching every possibility. You get into fractal realities. You'll hear about that, right? Fractal in the sense that, could it be that each of us is, when we touch the self, interfacing with the infinite force around us? That's exactly what Descartes found. Because when he said I am, the next thing he saw in the third meditation, which is a magnificent historical breakthrough, is that God is. How did he get that? Because the I touches the thou. And the everyday I is interfacing with the infinite thou. He got that proof. You can't do that proof here. That's where philosophers took him, and therefore they blew out Descartes and said, what a dunce to think you can prove that God exists. He wasn't proving it in this mind. He was proving it in the logos mind, the holistic mind. Why? He began to see the script that I am is touching the infinite thou. I am touching you. The I touches the other. That's the essence of moral consciousness. Jesus was teaching that. Moses was bringing the law. Buddha saw that in this space you can't be a free human being because the structure of that space keeps you in bondage. So all of our great spiritual traditions were saying this is where you get moksha, freedom, Sat Chitananda, being, consciousness, bliss, one word. Buddha Dharma, Buddha is the Dharma, is the law. Nirvana. All of these words, they're trying to help us understand the literacy of if you touch this field, you're in the zone. That's it. It's just as simple as that. You're in the zone. So when an athlete is running, and she's running around the nature walk, and she's been running for a long time, for 3-4 years, and then one day she is running, double bracket R. Think about what that means. It's not I am running. It's much deeper than that. She is the very running itself. The doer is the activity. She's one with the ecology, flowing with the turf, flowing with the breath, flowing with nature. She's in the yoga zone. She's in the Christ space. Right? She's in the God field. But you have to use that script. So I'll end on this idea. I've been lost. I hope you're following me. I'm suggesting, and the next slide, thanks for bearing with me. So, sloppy PowerPoint here. But here's the trick, and I'll leave you with this thought. When I started to see that it's absolutely vital for human beings to know the difference between this language and script and this one. And so it's so important, life and death, because if I live my life here, it's going to be broken if I can go into the integral, holistic, dialogic. All of these words are connected. Holistic, integral, dialogic, yogic, Buddha, Christ, whatever name you want to use. I'm in the flow. When athletes are in the zone, they are one with the activity, peak performance. The martial artists, they're one with the chi. Right? All of these arts know that you go into what's called non-dual, integral, holistic experience. My students would say, Professor Gangadine, I get it. I see that Arjuna is broken. And I see where Krishna is calling us in the yoga space to Om. How do I get there? It's so far away. This is how I was drawing the picture in the first decade after coming back from India in the 70s and the 80s to try and say it's important to see the difference. But then I helped. It took me a long time to get this. That's the end of that slide. This is what I will leave you with. We're always already in the Logos. When I suggested to and this is a basic axiom of all reality, all the wisdom. This begins to sum up all wisdom. The infinite field surrounds us, pervades us in every cell, in every subatomic particle within ourselves. It pervades every item in the universe. We're always in the infinite field. This is the space of the infinite connectivity. Everything is so profoundly interconnected that any one point encodes the entire field. Magnificent to believe. And every human being is a PowerPoint. Blake saw every grain of sand. There's infinity in a grain of sand. If you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. Gandhi understood the mountainous power of one. This one, if you could touch the PowerPoint that you are. The Quakers founding this college understood there's that of God in every person. It's not every grain of sand, but every grain of man and woman. That's not just a metaphor. If you could somehow interface with that infinite 0 point, whatever you want to call it within you, and bring it into your culture and into your life, that's the key to flourishing. And that's what it means to be in the zone. So from now on, when you write your name, I would suggest, the point is this, and I'll stop. Every word in every language that you might have, every culture, every script, every discipline, whatever script you're using, it is situated within the infinite script. And it's a download from it. So every word that you write, if you write it this way, every word, whatever language or lens, if you write it this way, you're going to begin to see the code of how to expand it into its full meaning. If you use the word time, time is broken. And Saith is going to sing about this. Time is broken because the past, the present, and the future are separate and broken off pieces. This is stress time. Ego time is stress time. My past, I was hurt, I was wounded, I'm caught, I can't leave it, I can't be now. My future, I want to get into graduate school, I want to get my grades, I can't think about now, I'm obsessed with the future. I'm broken. Can anyone enter into time? Many books are written about this. Now time. The power of now, Eckhart Tolle. Can you touch a now point? What would that be like? It's past, present, and future are all meeting at that one point right now. If you could surf the now time, which is all Zen, be here now, all Buddha, all Hindu thought, summed up in 3 words, be here now. Not here. Be here now. That now. You need the script, the Om script, to be able to get it. Right? So that if you, when you realize when I say I, whatever worldview I'm carrying or multiple worldviews, what is the journey of the awakening? What is the great shift? To put it simply, I would suggest it's this. It's letting go of these rigid stories that bind us and find that you are already who you are. The journey of wisdom is dropping, letting it go, stepping outside, letting it go. The obsessive, fixed stories we have from the lenses we carry to allow the deeper flow to be in the zone. So when athletes go into the zone in peak performance, those magic moments, when jazz musicians jazz and they're not ego jazzing, they are the music. When artists and lovers feel that intimacy of love, to be a lover here is not the same as being a lover here. When you're in the ego space, back to this space, when you love this other person who's an object for you, this is the subject-object space. You objectify yourself and the other. Love can't flourish here. When you step into this space, it's dialogic. The self and the other can meet, but you can't carry that baggage with you. You've got to open yourself. This is why this is the space of deep dialogue. To enter deep dialogue, the self has to open itself to the other and let her speak in her words. Let nature speak. Let the work of art show you in its terms, not putting your lens on it. So the key to human literacy is upgrading into this script. It's absolutely vital that we gain literacy to save our personal lives, our human lives, our democracy, our moral life, scientific life. This is high science. Because when you can step back and drop your prejudice lens and open up to the other and see and observe from this point of view, you begin to see the disclosure of reality. And I'll just conclude this part by suggesting that we've come to a point where this technology is imploding upon itself. If you say the world is over, no, the constructed world is imploding so that reality can show. The reason for optimism is the infinite force holds us in every moment. It's bigger than us. And whatever stories we have, we can let it go and allow the deeper reality to show. And that's where we discover ourselves. And the highest moves of culture has been a move from the single bracket into this double bracket space. I'll conclude with that point. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You're a wonderful audience. Can you hear me? Joan? Roger, can we? Okay. All right? Okay. So, thank you so much. We're going to now have Joan Borysenko make her presence. She's a magnificent being. And you have the notes about her great publications and her journey as a medical biologist, graduating from Bryn Mawr and going to Harvard Medical and a PhD in medical science, and her journey, magnificent journey. And what we heard this morning in her story is it's an amazing story she's carrying in terms of living wisdom. She is a Sophia, a beautiful Sophia. And so I'm just going to really just let you hear her for yourself and know that she is just one of the great pioneers opening up the space for the higher culture. Please welcome Joan Borysenko.
I'm going to disappear from down here and reappear above the line up here. So that's the hope. First of all, where's Saith? Is he here? That was magnificent. I'm glad it's videoed because my husband, Gordon, when I first met him, he said, my mantra is outside because that's the way you free yourself of the mind and you get to that space that your dad was just talking about. So we love that, outside. Okay, so here we are, and before I start with the PowerPoint, I liked this PowerPoint, but you know, Ashok last night issued an invitation to Gregg and me, and he said, let's think about ourselves as sort of improvisational jazz, moving together. So I've decided you should have a chance to be your own PowerPoint. And we're going to start with a little exercise. So I need to describe something to you. First of all, a small lesson in Jewish mysticism. And I have to apologize here because I'm not a singer. I just like to sing. But the Jewish mystics, actually, they didn't like words. They liked melodies, which are called nigun, because they said as soon as you started to use the words, you became objectified. And particularly if you used the word for God, you objectified that. And then you could not enter the mystery. So this is an old Hasidic mystical Jewish song. In Hebrew, it's on Ni Chai, which means I am alive. But it goes like this, and you can sing it with me, and then we'll do an exercise. So let me sing it through first. I am alive. I am alive. I am alive. And who is this aliveness I am? And who is this aliveness I am? And who is this aliveness I am? Is it not the blessed Holy One? Now, essentially, I can forget my whole PowerPoint because that's all you need to know about healing. That once you touch that aliveness, that's where the coherence of the body, the harmony of the body is restored. And we will get to how it is that we do that. But first, want to sing that? Would that be energizing? I think so. We need energy this time in the afternoon. Then you're going to be standing up because we'll do a little exercise. So here it goes. I'll sing it, you sing it back to me, okay? Call and response. I am alive. I am alive. I am alive. And who is this aliveness I am? And who is this aliveness I am? Is it not the Holy Blessed One? Is it not the Holy Blessed One? That's Rabbi Nahum of Chernobyl. Okay, so here's the deal. Sometime before grandfather's son ever kissed the breast of Mother Earth. There was a Logos that was married to the Sophia. The two were in union, the two were one. And then one day, for reasons that nobody ever knew, the Logos and the Sophia, in Hebrew, the Shekhinah, the feminine, and Baruch Hashem, the blessed holy name, they fell apart from one another, and the Shekhinah went into exile. And it is only through acts of love, deep dialogue, compassion, seeing ourselves through the other, being one, that we actually restore the wholeness of the world. So our job, in a certain way, is the reparation of the universe. And that, in mysticism, is part of the Great Shift. So here's what your part is going to be here. And that is, in Hebrew, the name of God is 4 vowel sounds that are blessedly unpronounceable, which prevents us from objectifying them. And this is a Hebrew letter Yud, He, Vuv, He, all vowels. The closest we could get to them is this. Sound of breath. And so, if we were to translate this into English, what would it mean? And by the way, this sort of, if you tried to make it sound in English, Yud, He, and the V is also a W in the He, that's how you get Yahweh or Jehovah. But we would never say that, because that objectifies what you just heard. But what it actually means is all that was, all that is, and all that shall be. That's it. It's like whatever's happening now. That's that Om space. That's that God space. And you're it. And again, the short course in healing is as soon as you recognize that, that's when healing happens. Spontaneously healing happens. And it happens not only for you, but as Gregg will explain, when it happens for any one of us, because we're a field that's a continuum, it happens for the whole. So here we go. You need a partner for this, and I actually need a volunteer. Elizabeth, come on up. I have an old friend who's a plant in the audience. Excellent for just these occasions. You have to come up over here, honey. Here are the stairs on that end. So what we're going to do is something very interesting. What does this look like to you? It sort of looks like a human body, doesn't it? There's a statement in Genesis, we are created in the image of God. And so the human being, Kabbalistically, our whole body is the image of God. And that's another relationship of healing and mind-body healing to God. So come on up here. Elizabeth, first of all. Hi, sweetie. Oh, I love this. It's great to see you. We won't have our conversation now. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to remind each other that our bodies are, in fact, in that Om space, that we are the very image of God. So I'm looking at you, girl. And first I have a question for you. Can I physically touch you because I'm going to trace these things on you, or would you rather have an air tracing? Because you got to ask the person before you touch them. Okay. Please touch me, she says. Glad to oblige. Okay. So Elizabeth, you are the image of God. I'm just going to trace the letters on her. The Yud, the Hey, the Vuv is tricky, too. So, like, do your best to be respectful here. The Vuv, you can kind of move to the air at a certain point. The Vuv and the Hey. So, you are the image of God. And so then she'd do it back to me. So that's what you want to do it? Okay, well, you wait up here because we'll get them in twos and then you can reciprocate. So stand on up and get a partner. Yeah. Let's just take a minute here. We'll take a... All right, everybody. Are you introduced? Yes? Okay, so listen up. Whoever has the shortest hair will do the tracing first, okay? So, all right. So, you're going to ask your partner whether it's okay to touch or whether they'd prefer an air tracing. So, going to ask? All right. So next, and now that we're up and a little bit energized, now we're going to get quiet for a minute. And it's your chance just to look deeply in this other person's eyes, beyond the identity of the name that they just gave you, to their aliveness, their essence. Or who is really before you? The Blessed Holy One. And so the invitation now is to remind your partner of that. You are the image of God. And then to trace, and I'll call it out to you, the Yud looks like a 7 across the forehead, down the cheek to the chin. And then the first Hey, start in the middle of the collarbones and trace down the arms. The Vav, the spinal cord, the whole system there, start at the collarbone and very respectfully trace down to the belt line. And the hay, start at the belt line and trace down both legs. When you've come back up, just look at your partner again and remind them you are the image of God. And now it's time to change positions, so please begin just by asking your partner, is it okay to touch? And look them in the eyes again. Here we are. That place where you look at them beyond form, and there's just the aliveness, the essence, the very power of love that unites the Logos and the Sophia, the Shekhinah and the Blessed Holy One. And you trace that on them, beginning with the Yud, the 7 across the forehead, and down to the chin. The first Hey, starting at the collarbones, tracing out and moving down the arms. The Vov, so respectful, beginning at the collarbone and tracing down to the waist. And the second Hey, tracing out from the center of the waist down both legs. When you come back up, look at that divine being and remind them once more, you are the image of God. Thanks, sweetheart. All right, everybody. So, Gregg, could you just bring me the controller? I forgot that. No, this thingy. But yeah. You know, if you bring up the bottle of water, it's good too. Thank you. Okay. So how was that, everybody? You got a sense? Wonderful. Mm-hmm. I learned that exercise from Rabbi Rami Shapiro, who writes a great column in Spirituality and Health magazine called Roadside Assistance for Your Spiritual Journey. So he is great. He's like this stand-up Alan Watts of Judaism. All right, so we're going to, now you've gotten the essence, you know, that sense of awe, of wonder, of aliveness, of spaciousness. That's what healing is. Actually, there is no difference between spirituality and healing. They're one and the same thing. And when we access that, quite miraculous things can happen. And a lot of what I'll have to say today is really has to do with the nitty-gritty of what gets in our way of accessing that, and of some of the little stations we have to go through on our way to the journey. Well, maybe I'll tell it. When Ashok and Gregg and I were doing the program, the Beautiful Global Lens program of Ashok this morning, we really had a great time. It really was improv. And one of the questions, Ashok was saying, well, how did you get into this? I'll give you about a 1-minute version of the story so that you begin to understand the context for this a little bit better. When I was 10, I became suddenly and cripplingly mentally ill. Overnight, I developed a psychosis. I started to hallucinate headhunters, snakes, scorpions, odd shamanic things. And I believed that they were going to kill my family. I would dream it at night, and in the daytime, I would see it, hallucinate it. My true belief about mental illness and bad habits is that all of them are meant to be solutions to some problem. It's the best that our mind-body system could do. And it's the same with illness. And so what my mind-body system did was to develop a second mental illness to help me with the first one. So within about a week, I developed obsessive-compulsive disorder. And the belief I had was that if I did certain rituals, it would prevent the nightmare horrors from manifesting in the living room and killing my family. And by the way, I had some very interesting rituals. The most fascinating was reading. That all my reading had to be upside down and therefore backwards, and repeated 3 times without interruption, or I would dissolve into the most horrible state of terror because I thought my family was going to die. This does amazing things to your brain. I have an incredible brain from reading upside down and backwards for months on end. But I had maybe a dozen different rituals that I did. And one day, after, there was nothing back then. This was 54 years ago. There was no Klonopin, Prozac, or cognitive behavior therapy. There was nothing happening there. So I decided that I would pray. And I sat down to pray, and healing comes from one place. It comes from an open heart. It comes from that switch out of the mind space into the space of the body, which is our most immediate way of accessing the now. We live in the body. You can't transcend it. You actually get to that space through your body. And the connection that gets you into the body space is your emotions. If you want to say, what is the interface between mind and the body? It's the emotional space. So if you happen to be in an intense place of terror like I was, you got a big emotional engine that's driving you. And I sat there with this tremendous fear, which drove a second emotional engine, which is longing for peace, longing for healing. And from that state of fear and longing, what happened was I completely got out of my mind. And the answer to that prayer was a state of sudden arrival in the Om state, sudden arrival in a state of cosmic consciousness. And at 10, you don't have any context for this. All I knew was, completely crazy, only seconds before, feeling really good now. And the fear completely dissipated and was replaced by a sense of the peace that passeth understanding. And the peace is loaded with information. There's no way to say this in words. It's a field of information that you access. Sometimes we call this intuition, which is an aspect of this. But it's a knowing so deep, and it's a knowing that doesn't require words, and it's a knowing that floods into you at many levels at the same time. So I knew at that moment several things. Number one, I knew I could recover. And number two, I had an exact plan for how I could recover. And number 3, a poem downloaded into me, which was part of the plan for recovery. What I knew is that if I did another ritual, I would stay stuck in this space. That this, for me, was an initiation. It was an ordeal that I had to face, and that I needed to be able not to do another ritual. Now, I have to tell you, when the life of everyone you love, you believe is dependent on your rituals, it's no small thing not to do one. But the poem, which I won't belabor you with, the poem put me in a state of peace. It was a poem about light, a poem really about courage, a poem about being more than in fact we are, and being guided and held through the process of life. When I repeated that poem, it put me back in that I am state, back in that safe space. And I was able to just do that. I was able, after a bit, just to think about the poem, and the space would come back. And in a period of about 3 days, all of the mental illness disappeared. So, as a result of this, certain themes began to make sense to me and grow as I did through the years. I became interested, first of all, in the question of the human brain. How could it be that one moment you were completely in one frame of mind, in another moment you were crazy, and in a third moment you were back in your normal frame of mind, but not quite normal? There's an old Buddhist saying that at the beginning of the journey, mountains are mountains and rivers are rivers. In the middle of the journey, mountains are no longer mountains and rivers are no longer rivers. And at the end of the journey, mountains are mountains again and rivers are rivers. And so that was kind of the understanding that began to develop through the years. So I wanted to be a brain scientist. I thought, what a handy thing to understand the brain, to understand the body and biology. And then I also thought, better understand psychology, clearly, because I'd had a psychological illness. And then, mostly I was interested in what was that spiritual experience. And is there a way to actually get back there again? Was this just something I fell into? Or does anybody know the road back there? And so that became my great interest for these last 54 years, is the interweaving of science, psychology, and spirituality. So that gives you just a little tad. Now I'm going to give you a taste of what this actually looks like when we bring it to a very practical level, which is what I have done. I was a cancer cell biologist at Tufts Medical School in the 1970s, teaching medical and dental students and doing research really on what now we would think of as epigenetics. Because I thought to myself, is there a way that even though the DNA of cancer cells is injured, is there some way that I can change the culture medium that they live in, change their environment, so that the cells actually change back to normal again? Their DNA isn't normal, but they look normal, they behave normally, they communicate normally. And the answer to that is yes. I found ways to restore actually by changing fatty acids, which is why what we eat is so important. Changing the fatty acids in the culture medium, I could turn cancer cells to normal again. And at this point in the research, my very beloved father got cancer. And suddenly I realized, what good is everything I know about cancer cells when the person who I love the most dearly in all the world is dying of cancer? And I know exactly nothing about what human beings endure when they have cancer. What happens to the family? What are the big questions like, what's the difference between the quality of life and the quantity of life? Is it for everybody to be treated, or is this something that they must decide within themselves? And back then, there was no soul care in healthcare. It just wasn't happening. These were not questions people asked. What happened with my father was they gave him a drug that was good for his cancer cells, but drove him crazy. He developed a manic psychosis. It was like a stranger had moved into his skin. pressure of speech. You couldn't speak to him. He wasn't there. It was like he had disappeared. And we went to the physician, and the physician said, he needs the medicine. He needs the medicine. And so he got it, until he had to have a surgery, and they took him off the medicine. And then it was exactly like somebody whose ship had sunk at sea came in on a life raft a year later. And to see him again, to know him again, amazing. Well, he did something which was entirely within his right to do. Knowing that they were going to put him back on the medicine, he decided he couldn't live like that. And one night, after my mother had fallen asleep, he went to the window of their condominium. They had moved to Florida. It was on the 37th floor, and he jumped to his death. And my response to that was, I think I've been in the laboratory long enough. I know everything about cancer cells, but what I really need to do is to make sense of what happened to my father and to be able to help maybe even one other family. And I thought if either one other family can have an outcome different from this, then it will somehow or other give some meaning to what we've endured as a family. So that's the background for what you're going to see. And I'm a mystic at one level, but at another level, I work on the ground with the nitty-gritty. I'm what's called a spiritual mentor, spiritual guide, spiritual director. I work directly with people in that way because that's what really makes my heart fly open, is to do that. And I'm also a scientist and a psychologist. So just a little tour now through the paradigm shift in medicine, because the personal stories that I've told you have a great deal to do with what that paradigm shift is. How many minutes do I have left? What? Keep going? Okay. I got like so into it I didn't look at the watch. Okay. All right. I live in Colorado, so I like this. It says, "The truth is, doctor, I'm not a great believer in Western medicine." Yeah. But I am a great believer to a point. We need evidence-based medicine. What Western medicine has shown us is the etiology or causation of disease, that there's a cause and an effect. The trouble is that a great deal of the causes are energetic causes. They're problems with our aliveness. They have to do with our withdrawal from source into that separate sense of self. And it is the restoration of the wholeness and the aliveness, the entering of that Om state that is the healing. And that's the part that's actually missing from Western medicine. And that's the part that we're beginning to see. For example, the power of belief. The dawn of mind-body medicine was actually on Anzio Beach, when a nurse who worked with a physician by the name of Henry Beecher ran out of morphine for a wounded soldier. And she said to him, held up her syringe, she said, "Here's some morphine." And his pain went away. Now what we know, here's a brain scan. This is a functional magnetic resonance image. And it's a study of people who received electric shocks and were told that they were getting a numbing cream, a pain-killing cream first. And the activity in their brain areas involved in sensing pain with the placebo decreased. So this began to get interesting in medicine when we could say, hey, there's a correlate. Something actually happens in your brain when you start to think a different way, when you change the story, Ashok, that you're telling yourself and you open to a different story. Something goes on. Knowing this, the National Center for the Clinical Application, this is the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine within the National Institutes of Health, began to realize we are actually the medicine. Whether you are a massage therapist, a Reiki practitioner, a nurse, a physician, a psychologist, any kind of therapist, the quality of your interaction with that patient is actually the medicine. And there is a transmission that happens. And part of that transmission is that you transmit the possible to the patient. The field of complementary and alternative medicine focuses on interactions among our brain, our mind, our body, and behavior, and particularly the energy system out of which they grow. And it researches the effects of emotional, mental, social, spiritual, behavioral factors on health. But here's the part I love the most. The fundamental guiding precept of the whole field is respect for and enhancement of each person's capacity for self-knowledge and self-care, because the empowerment comes from within the person. The field views illness as an opportunity for personal growth and transformation, and healthcare providers as catalysts and guides in this process. This so excited me, I couldn't believe it. During the early years of the AIDS epidemic, I'd started a mind-body clinic at one of the Harvard teaching hospitals with a physician whose name is Herbert Benson. And you may know his name because he was the first one really to study meditation and realize there's something about meditation that changes the body, the mind, the attitude, the whole deal, that it creates a field that is entirely different, that it's an entrance into a space of being where language is not the king of the mountain anymore. It's an entrance into a place of knowing, a different way of knowing. It's a movement from the mind into the heart, and it's only through the heart that we connect with that larger field. And that's all that meditation is. When the inner dialogue through which we maintain our image of the world slows down even a little tiny bit, suddenly, something else. We enter that other state. And this, hopefully, you see, you're a tuning fork. As a healthcare provider, when you are able to function out of that space, you draw other people into that space. It's a magnetic kind of field. Okay. The question we're going to ask now, though, and the question that I was asking during the AIDS epidemic with people with stress-related disorders, people with cancer who came to see me, was this. The question I would ask them, it's not what you see on the board, I would say to them, why do you think you have AIDS? Why do you think you have cancer? What does this mean to you? And you get lots and lots and lots of different outlooks on that. But the outlook that I got on it that was the most prevalent and most troublesome was this. People would say either, I got it because I'm a bad person and God is punishing me for my sins, or I've been thinking wrong and therefore I brought it upon myself. Those, by the way, are New Age guilt and Old Age guilt. They're two sides of the same coin, not at all different. But they are a reduction of who we are to a very, very difficult story. The fact is that for many illnesses, an illness, as I said before, is not even actually the problem. In some cases, and I'm not saying cancer or AIDS in particular, my mental illness was a solution to a problem, just the way that addiction or obesity are attempts at solving the problem. They may be less than skillful solutions, but they're still solutions. So let's move on, and I'll tell you a little bit about this. Because to live in that I am space, or even to glimpse it occasionally, to come into a healing space, we have got to overcome the stories that tell us that we're less than who we are. The stories that say, I am such a bad person that I don't deserve to live on this planet or take up space or breathe air. So this is a critical study about that. It's called the ACE study, ACE standing for Adverse Childhood Experiences. I'll tell you the story of it. It's a study that's been going on a decade or more at the Kaiser Permanente in San Diego. So there was a serendipitous thing that happened. They were running a group for people who were obese, a weight loss group, and they had a lot of dropouts. Not unexpected, except the dropouts, for the most part, had been very successful at losing weight. So they decided to ask them, why are you dropping out? First person they asked said something like, I'm dropping out because losing weight feels unsafe. I was raped. And in the first year after that, I gained 105 pounds. And that's the way that I keep myself safe. So obesity was, in fact, her solution to feeling vulnerable and feeling unsafe. And unbelievably, and fortunately, Kaiser Permanente does a very good health history. And they asked people, what happened to you in childhood? And they found 9 different things, adverse childhood experiences that could happen. Things like there was violence toward your mother in the household, or there was violence toward you, emotionally, physically, or there was contact sexual abuse. They found things like, well, there was depression in your household. If you live with a depressed parent, that's an adverse experience. There were, another one was losing a parent for any reason, divorce, death, any reason whatsoever. So you kind of get the general gist of what these are. And there were 8 or 9 possibilities. And these, by the way, the physicians in charge of this, let me go back one. Vincent Felitti was the physician at Kaiser Permanente, and he teamed up with Robert Anda from the National Center for Disease Control in Atlanta. And Felitti said, this is how you turn the gold of a child who believes that everything is possible. The gold of a child whose innate true nature is intact, how you turn them into lead. Because here was what was found. There's an idea somehow that time heals. But what they found is that's just not true. Time does not heal. Time conceals. And almost all of our health problems as adults can be traced back to adverse childhood experiences, almost in a dose-response curve. The more ACEs, the more the chance of illness. So they found, get this, a male child with an ACE score of 6 has a 4,600% increase in the probability of becoming an IV drug abuser. This is 0.1 increase. It's huge. Or this, an ACE score of 4 increases the probability of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease by 390%. For a year, just so that you know, I have an ACE score of 4, and I could not stop smoking. It was the hardest thing I ever did. In fact, I had to do it at least 1,000 times. And my favorite, sort of the turning point was this. I was already working in a hospital setting. And, you know, I was not like a big smoker, 1 or 2 a day, but I liked that one at work, and I'd sneak off to go have it. There was my favorite smoking bathroom. And because you stink after you smoke, I always had a towel, and I'd wrap my hair in it, put it over my face, so only my lips hung out. Then I'd button up my white lab coat, you know, to cover up further, and I'd open the window. So there I was, when smoking away in the bathroom in this way, when the head of housekeeping knocks on the door. And she says, "Who's in there?" And I thought, oh my God, I'm caught. This is an incredibly embarrassing moment. What should I do? She's knocking. What do you think I did? I crawled out the window. That's like a hitting bottom moment. What it is. But this explained it to me. I knew all of the health risks, but it did not matter to me because there was a certain kind of sadness, I can't even explain it, a certain feeling inside of me that the smoking alleviated. It was the best solution I had at the moment, and that's the fact. Okay, an ACE score of 4 or more raises the probability of depression almost 500%. And depression is an epidemic in this country. An ACE score of 4 or more raises the probability of suicide by 1,220%. So, we need to deal with this. Getting a prescription is not a whole lot of help. I mean, it may help the illness, but it doesn't help the underlying problem. And this is the big shift in medicine, is the look at the underlying problems. Okay, I wanted to say something about our emotions. The difficult emotions. There are two kinds of negative emotions. There are negative emotions that simply come as guides from beyond. There's a Rumi poem about that we'll see in a moment. Negative emotions are important. There's even a very positive case for depression because it makes you look closely at your life. And it's an attempt, some people think, of the circuits of the brain and your past experience to come together in a way that you make sense of things so that you can find better solutions. Whoops. So there's that kind of negative emotion. And then there's a very different kind of negative emotion, a pervasive sense of shame, guilt, and not good enoughness that prevents healing. That's the main thing that prevents healing, and that's what comes from childhood stuff. Now, here's the relation of this in part to health. We have something in the body called pro-inflammatory cytokines. These are our immune factors that increase inflammation in the body. Inflammation being a final common pathway for almost any disease that you can imagine. That's why